Tonight, Canada will drop counter tariffs on most U.S. goods.
We are matching something the Americans have done, and it's very significant, it's unique, we get the benefit.
The Prime Minister's shift in strategy.
His elbows have mysteriously gone missing.
Latest tariffs on steel and aluminum are unjustified, they're illegal, they're bad for American workers, bad for American industry, and of course for Canadian industry as well. We have counter tariffs in a gross amount before remissions on over 90 billion of U.S. imports.
Canada just threatened to do the unthinkable, cut America off from its greatest guilty pleasure. And no, this isn't about oil, gas, or steel. Ottawa is preparing to slam the door on chocolate. That's right. America's sweet tooth has just been turned into a weapon. For the first time in history, a trade war is brewing not over machinery or metals, but over candy bars and cocoa beans. A $20 billion industry that fuels Halloween, Easter, baseball games, and childhood memories now sits on the chopping block. And here's the kicker. If Canada follows through, this won't just mean higher prices. It could trigger shortages, panic, and even a cultural shock that makes steel tariffs look like pocket change. So buckle up, because what you're about to hear isn't just about chocolate, it's about the unraveling of America's global power. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Should chocolate ever be used as a weapon in trade wars? It all started with Trump's return to the White House and his obsession with tariffs. Determined to show America who's boss, he signed off on a new round of restrictions, aimed directly at Canada. Lumber, agriculture, pharmaceuticals, even autos, nothing was spared. His advisors sold it as America First.
Only America First. America First.
But in Ottawa, it looked more like Canada Last. And that's when Prime Minister Mark Carney dropped the bomb. In a closed-door session, he told Parliament, "We can no longer remain hostages of American aggression. The time for new coalitions has come."
One of the reasons why we have retaliatory tariffs on over $90 billion worth of U.S. goods. We are in intensive negotiations with the Americans and in parallel preparing reprisals if those negotiations do not succeed.
Those weren't just fighting words. They were marching orders. Carney's team began studying every weakness in the U.S. economy. Steel? Too obvious. Cars? Already targeted. But then they found something Trump never expected. America's dependence on something sweet, something cultural, something deeply vulnerable. Chocolate. And that's where the real retaliation began. But why chocolate of all things? That's where the story gets shocking. On the surface, it sounds absurd. But to Canadians plotting retaliation, it was the perfect pressure point. In America, chocolate isn't just another snack. It's a cultural obsession. Every year, Americans spend more than $20 billion on it. From Halloween buckets to Valentine's hearts, from school cafeterias to Super Bowl halftime breaks, chocolate is everywhere. Hershey's, Mars, Nestle. These aren't just companies. They're childhood memories in shiny wrappers. But here's the vulnerability Washington never saw coming. The U.S. doesn't control its own chocolate lifeline. Nearly 85% of cocoa is imported. America may boast big brands, but it's utterly dependent on foreign supply. And who plays a crucial role in processing and re-exporting that chocolate? Canada. Ottawa realized that by choking off this supply, it wouldn't just squeeze the U.S. economy. It would hit directly at its culture, its daily life, its sense of normalcy. And when word leaked, it sent shockwaves through Washington. But Canada wasn't planning to act alone. Behind the scenes, it was quietly assembling a global coalition. Ottawa knew that a chocolate ban alone could rattle Washington, but with the right partners, it could bring America's sweet empire crashing down. According to leaked reports, Canada has already opened back-channel talks with the world's biggest cocoa giants. Ivory Coast, Ghana, and Nigeria. Together, these three nations control over 60% of global cocoa exports. If they joined forces with Canada, the U.S. would be locked out of the very ingredient that makes chocolate possible. And that wasn't all. Europe's powerhouses, Belgium and Switzerland, were quietly signaling interest. These aren't just any allies. They're home to the world's most prestigious chocolate industries. If Brussels sided with Ottawa, America wouldn't just face tariffs. It would face an outright diplomatic blockade in a market worth hundreds of billions globally. One Deutsche Bank analyst warned bluntly, if this coalition solidifies, the US risks being cut out of the global chocolate trade altogether. It's a point of no return. For Trump, it was a nightmare scenario. His America First agenda had somehow pushed even America's closest allies into forming an anti-American trade alliance. But Washington's fears weren't just about economics. What came next struck at something deeper, the political fallout at home. Inside the White House, panic set in. The danger wasn't only about trade numbers or corporate losses, it was about people, everyday Americans. Imagine a Halloween without chocolate, a Valentine's Day without heart-shaped boxes, Easter baskets with nothing but jelly beans. Memes about a chocolate shortage began flooding social media, but beneath the humor was a creeping anxiety. Americans weren't laughing, they were bracing for a cultural shock. One official admitted to the Wall Street Journal, if Canada really cuts off this market, we won't just face shortages, we'll face the frustration of millions of Americans. And that's exactly what terrified Trump. This wasn't about tariffs, it was about his political image. In a country where chocolate is woven into daily life, being the president who let it vanish would look like a national humiliation. Meanwhile, industry giants, Hershey's, Mars, Nestle, USA, were sounding the alarm. Lobbyists swarmed Congress, demanding immediate intervention. But time was running out. Ottawa wasn't bluffing. And the most chilling part? Canada's strategy didn't stop at chocolate. This was only the opening move in something far bigger. Analysts quickly realized something terrifying. Chocolate was just the prototype. If Canada could rally allies to squeeze the US out of sweets, what would stop them from doing the same with coffee, tea, medicines, or even rare earth metals? The very backbone of tech and defense. Suddenly, the world saw how fragile America's position really was. For decades, Washington had assumed control over global consumer markets. The dollar was the anchor. The supply chains ran through US-backed corporations. But this chocolate gambit exposed the truth. Those chains could be broken, and fast. Every move Trump made to protect America was backfiring, accelerating the shift away from US dollar dominance. What looked like a trade spat was mutating into a systemic unraveling of the global order America once controlled. As one Harvard professor wrote, chocolate is no longer a commodity. It's a metaphor for the collapse of trust in the American economy. And for Trump, that metaphor was becoming reality. But the battlefield wasn't just economic. Canada was preparing its next strike, not in the markets, but on the diplomatic stage. While Washington scrambled to contain the crisis, Ottawa was already moving to lock in its advantage. This wasn't just about trade deals. It was about rewriting the rules of global diplomacy. Canadian diplomats launched a quiet but aggressive campaign in Geneva and Brussels, pushing the narrative that the United States wasn't a victim of unfair treatment. It was the aggressor. By slapping tariffs on allies, Trump had provoked this retaliation. Behind closed doors, Canada courted the World Trade Organization, framing itself as the defender of fair trade. European officials, weary of Trump's endless tariff threats, began leaning toward Ottawa's side, and talks extended southward to Latin America, Ecuador, and Brazil, countries with booming cocoa and processing industries. One Canadian envoy summed it up bluntly: if America closes its doors to allies, then allies will find new paths. For Washington, the nightmare was spreading. This wasn't just about chocolate anymore. It was about a growing anti-US alliance reshaping global trade. But the most dangerous blow wasn't coming from boardrooms or treaties, it was coming straight from American culture itself. While Washington scrambled to contain the crisis, Ottawa was already moving to lock in its advantage. This wasn't just about trade deals, it was about rewriting the rules of global diplomacy. Canadian diplomats launched a quiet but aggressive campaign in Geneva and Brussels, pushing the narrative that the United States wasn't a victim of unfair treatment, it was the aggressor. By slapping tariffs on allies, Trump had provoked this retaliation. For Washington, the nightmare was spreading. This wasn't just about chocolate anymore. It was about a growing anti-US alliance reshaping global trade. But the most dangerous blow wasn't coming from boardrooms or treaties. It was coming straight from American culture itself. This wasn't just an economic fight anymore. It was a cultural earthquake. Think about it. More than 100 chocolate festivals are held in the US every year. Halloween, Easter, Christmas, entire traditions revolve around sweets. To strip chocolate away wasn't just a trade tactic. It was ripping at the fabric of American life. Psychologists warned that symbolic blows cut deeper than rising oil or gas prices. Families might tolerate paying more at the pump. But take away their kids' Halloween candy? That felt personal. That felt like betrayal. On social media, the cry spread fast. Hands off our chocolate! What began as a meme snowballed into a rallying cry. In towns across America, people weren't debating tariffs or trade balances. They were asking a far more human question. Why is our government letting our chocolate disappear? For Trump, the optics were devastating. He had promised to make America strong again. Instead, he was being painted as the president who let Canada steal America's sweet tooth. And if Ottawa follows through this fall with a full ban, the message won't just be economic, it will be historic. This fall could mark a turning point. If Ottawa actually slams the door on chocolate exports, it won't just be a shortage or a trade dispute. It will be a symbol that America's dominance in global trade is melting away, one bite at a time. Because if allies can weaponize something as simple and as beloved as chocolate, then what comes next? Coffee, medicines, rare earth metals? The message to Washington is clear. The era of unquestioned U.S. economic supremacy is crumbling. For Trump, the consequences are brutal. The man who promised to make America great again now faces the prospect of being remembered as the president who triggered a coalition of allies against the United States and lost America its sweet tooth in the process. Chocolate is no longer just candy, it's a warning, a metaphor for the bitter future that awaits if America's trade wars continue down this path. So, I'll leave you with the question. Do you think Canada will actually pull the trigger? And if they do, is chocolate just the beginning of America's unraveling? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories reshaping our world. Because sometimes, the biggest wars don't start with bullets or bombs, they start with candy bars.